So there's no denying that managing strangers for the very first time is very hard. But honestly, I gotta say that managing your former peers is just on a whole other level, and it's one that absolutely nobody prepares you for. So listen, if you've recently been promoted and you are managing people who used to be your peers, and it's feeling so much harder than you ever expected it to, I want you to know that you are in exactly the right place. And that's because in today's video, I'm gonna show you the 3 biggest mistakes almost every new manager makes during this transition, and what to do instead so that you can actually lead this team of yours without feeling like they are still seeing you as their peer instead of their manager. You know, having worked with now hundreds of new managers inside my programs, I've seen how this transition is one of the most, let's say, emotionally loaded moments in early leadership that can easily derail you and keep you stuck if you do not course correct early, which is why I wanted to do this video today. Now, I do want you to stick around to the end because at the very end of this video, I'm gonna talk about the most important action step that you can take if you are transitioning from peer to manager. So first, what I wanna do is introduce you to someone that you actually might recognize in yourself. And her name is Friendly Fiona. And like you, she also just got promoted from within her team. But she's taken an approach that is actually making her transition harder than it needs to be. So I want you to see if you can spot the issues. So after Fiona gets promoted, she makes it a habit to bring in lunch and treats just to keep the good vibes going. She says things like, "Oh, don't worry about it," or "It's fine," when standards aren't being met. She covers for her people and she says, "Oh, don't stress about being late. I've got your back. You know that." She asks for favors instead of giving direction by saying, "Hey, could you maybe just get that done for me?" And she still participates in gossip about other departments and colleagues. Can you spot the issue? Well, on the surface, I think Fiona sounds like a great manager. She sounds super fun, approachable, likable. I mean, treats and lunch, who doesn't love that? And honestly, I gotta say, before anyone comes for me in the comments, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But underneath all those actions, combined together, there are some serious issues with her overall approach. I mean, I don't know about you, but doesn't it seem like Fiona has not really made the shift? Feels like she's still one of the crew, like nothing has changed. So let's talk about what would cause this, okay? Because I think that's important. So in talking to managers, what usually creates this is fear, right? The fear of being seen as someone who has changed. You know, I've had many people tell me, "Mac, I don't want my team to think I'm too good now," or "I don't want them to feel like I've allowed this promotion to get to my head," or "I don't want to be one of those managers that can't be relatable and approachable just because they have a title. I still want to feel like I'm part of the team. I still want them to feel like I'm here for them." Can you relate to any of that? If you can, I totally get it, because I mean, for me personally, I remember specifically thinking like, I don't want anyone to think I'm above doing the work. I want to be right in there with them. I want them to know that I'm still part of the team. So when I say I get it, I really do if that's your thoughts. Here's the problem with that thinking. As well-intentioned as it might be, what it does is it creates situations where you are actually undermining your own authority without even realizing it. I mean, think about it. If your thinking is that you want to be just a member of the team and you don't want them to see you as anyone different, then why should they? Why should they respect your ask and your role, right? If you were actively showing them that they shouldn't. Listen, saying yes to management does not mean that you are a new person now. It doesn't mean that you're no longer part of the team. But what it does mean is that your role or the function on that role has changed. And that change has to be acknowledged first by you so that it can be acknowledged by the team. So the question becomes like, how do you do that? Well, here's what it shouldn't look like. And this is actually the second mistake that I see a lot of managers making when they make the transition. And for that, I want to introduce you to corporate Chris, okay? Same situation, promoted from within, but a completely different reaction to the promotion. So for Chris, he has seen far too many managers be too casual, and he's determined to build his credibility really quickly, so he does things like stops joining the team for lunch. He starts every conversation with an agenda. He references policy and situations that honestly just need a human moment. He's overly formal in his communications, and when someone tries to joke around with him like the way that they used to, Chris just gives them kind of like a tight smile and redirects to the task at hand. So looking at this entire picture, what do you think is wrong with corporate Chris's approach? Well, I don't know about you, but to me, he's just trying too hard to highlight that his function has shifted. And it's created the situation where he's now so distant that now there's a disconnect, right, between him and his team. And what this creates is a team that is obviously not going to escalate issues to him, and people that will eventually just do the bare minimum and go home and then talk about him behind his back. I mean, let's be real. So what do you think is driving this approach? Well, to me, I think it's also fear, right? Fear of not being taken seriously. You know, I've had managers who have used this approach say to me, well, Mac, I just needed them to know that things were different now, right? I needed them to respect my role, and this was the only way I knew how. And I want you to know that that's understandable, right? Nobody wants to be a pushover manager. Nobody wants to spend their first entire year just fighting for authority that they should already have. So overcorrecting in this way does kind of feel like the logical answer. Until, of course, you realize that respect is not commanded by distance. Bottom line is both approaches are ineffective, right? And that's because impactful leadership is not about being liked, but it's also not about being feared, right? It's about being trusted. And trust requires both warmth and follow through. It requires consistency, clarity, and connection, right? It's not one or the other. So the question becomes, okay, Mac, totally understand why these approaches are a no-go, but what am I supposed to do instead? Well, here's what I'll say, okay? While both Chris and Fiona had different approaches that were clearly, like we said, ineffective, in addition to their approach, they also actually made another mistake, the both of them. And the mistake that they made is that neither of them had the conversation, right? Neither of them sat down with their team and said, hey, things are changing, right? And here's what that means. And here's how I see my role now. And here's what I'm going to need from you. And here's how you can count on me moving forward. Now, of course, I kind of simplified that, but you get the gist, right? They didn't have the definitive elephant in the room conversation, which allowed old habits and assumptions to kind of fill the vacuum. You see, if you don't define what this new relationship and what this shift looks like, well, people are just going to fill in the blanks, either with what you don't want them to fill it in with, or you'll fill it in with over accommodations like Fiona, or with distance like Chris. So have the reset conversation. And listen, it does not need to be anything formal. In fact, you can actually start at something like this. You know, hey, Sally, I just want to take a few minutes to acknowledge that obviously things are changing between us, and I don't want to pretend that that's not real. Obviously, our working relationship matters to me, and because it matters to me, I just want to be really intentional about how we move forward together. And then go into what you got to say, right? It's as simple as that. At the end of the day, you do not have to change yourself completely like Chris or overdo it in friendship mode like Fiona. You can be you, which, by the way, is what's going to make you successful. And by doing that, you can show up intentionally with warmth, with clarity and consistency, so long as you take the time to properly define the new relationship. And if you want to know exactly what else you should be doing in this transition to set yourself up for success, I want you to watch this video here next, because in it, I'm actually going to break down how you can build your credibility as a manager during that really crucial transition period.